This is Special Agent Klein with the FBI. We're downstairs.
You already know. My name is Isaac.
By the time the email said, "You have a new parent-child DNA match," 2 FBI agents were already at my door with the kind of smiles people use at funerals. In Detroit, ghosts don't rattle chains. They send push notifications. Imani Carter, a 29-year-old medical records clerk from Detroit's West Side, spits in a tube to chase a family rumor, a Creole grandfather in Louisiana, a soldier father who died young, a lineage to fill in the blank space on every school form. The results detonate her life. A parent-child match to a man the FBI believes is Isaac Cole, a fugitive tied to a deadly 1987 armored truck heist that left 3 guards dead in a city scared of its own streets. As federal agents leverage her DNA to reopen the case, Imani's mother doubles down on old lies. A black Detroit detective warns her about federal shortcuts, and strangers begin watching her from idling cars. The more Imani learns, the less she trusts anyone, especially the father, who may not be the monster the headlines made him out to be. Caught between blood and justice, she follows a trail of coded ledgers, community secrets, and a city's buried grief. What she uncovers forces a choice. Help hunt her father, or help him tell the truth before someone silences them both. Before we get into the case file, just a quick note. If stories of hidden motives, dead ends, and unexpected turns are your thing, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell so the next mystery finds you first. Now, let's open the file. The email hit at 7:02 m. Just as the bus hissed to a stop on Grand River, and the morning sun tried to decide if it was going to show up for Detroit or take the day off. I was wedged between a man who smelled like gasoline and loneliness and a grandmother folding lottery tickets into a prayer. My phone buzzed 3 times in a neat, annoying row. Subject: You have a new DNA match. From Ancestry. I could have waited. I could have let it sit until my first break at Henry Ford, where I combed through charts and scanned signatures like a machine. But curiosity had been gnawing at me for a week, ever since the results trickled in percentages and pie charts. West Africa, a sliver of French Canadian, a sprinkle of something that made my aunties raise their eyebrows and ask if my great-great somebody had a secret. There'd been second cousins and fourth cousins, messages with, "Hey, we might be kin," and little tree icons. But not this. Not the big one. The subject line made the skin at the base of my neck prickle. I tapped it. We found a parent-child match for your DNA profile. Display name: Evan P. Predicted relationship: parent-child. The bus jolted, and I almost dropped the phone into a stranger's lap. Evan P., a blank silhouette where a face should be. My chest felt too tight for my lungs. I could hear my mother's voice already. Don't go chasing trouble, Imani. Trouble ain't hard to find. I'd asked her for years. Who was my father? The answer changed depending on the season, the mood, the way the light fell through the kitchen blinds. A soldier with eyes like late summer. A boy from the block who ran before I was born. A good man who died in a crash. Always vague, flavored with sadness, lit with a closed sign. When I pushed, the sadness turned sharp. I gave you a roof. I gave you everything I had. Ain't that enough? I pressed view match with a finger that didn't feel like mine. A profile was almost empty. Evan P., no photo. An email address that looked like a burger. A note: This user has elected not to share a family tree, and yet there it was. The big bold bar where the site tried to make science feel like a hug. You share 3,483 cm across 23 segments. Estimated relationship: parent-child. A near certainty, like gravity. A man across the aisle coughed into the kind of cough that says he ignores doctors. The grandmother glanced over my shoulder and clucked her tongue the way church mothers do when they see something they don't understand, but plan to prey on anyway. I tucked the phone into my jacket. My palms were sweating. The bus sighed again and rolled forward, letting the neighborhoods flip past like Record's brick bungalows with chain-link yards, corner stores with murals fading in the sun, a barbershop where the same men argued the same sports, as if stopping would kill them. I could feel the city waking up, a big creature stretching its back against the river, and I felt the old ache I never admitted out loud, a father-shaped blank right there under my ribs. By the time I stepped through the heavy glass doors of the hospital, the building hummed with the fluorescent focus of too many lives at once. I flashed my badge, listened to the metal detector sigh like it was tired of being suspicious, and took the stairs to records because the elevator and I were not on speaking terms. "Girl, why you look like you just saw the angel of death?" Tasha spun in her chair as I slid behind my desk. She'd painted her nails the kind of green you can only pull off if you don't care about rules. I got a match. My voice sounded far away, like it had taken the service stairs. Tasha's eyebrows rose. "What kind?" "Third cousin twice removed. Lives in Arizona. Sells crystals on Etsy. Posts about moon water." "Parent, child." The swivel chair stopped mid-spin. "Say it again," I told her. The name, the emptiness around it. The bar that didn't lie. "Ooh." She propped her elbows on my desk like it was a gossip bar. "Okay. First, breathe. Second, write him. Third, take screenshots of everything, because these sites get weird. Fourth, don't you dare meet nobody in a parking lot."
Heard you had family in town. You got something for me? Right?
"I'm not writing him. I need to talk to Ma first." The word felt childish in my mouth. Mom. Renee, the woman who could beat a utility, Bill into submission, and fix a busted kitchen pipe with duct tape and a curse. "Okay," Tasha said, softer now. "But don't let her stop you from wanting what you want. That's yours." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I saw the area code 313, home soil. I stepped into the narrow fluorescent hallway that always smelled faintly like toner and winter. "Hello? Is this Miss Carter?" A man's voice, firm enough to cut meat. The kind of voice that had practiced being a maid. Who's asking? "This is Special Agent Daniel Klein with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." He said it all at once, like he'd said it 1,000 times and expected it to work this time too. "I'm with Special Agent Celeste Alvarez. We're downstairs in the lobby. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your recent DNA test." The hallway tilted, and I locked my knees. Somewhere down the corridor, a printer coughed up paper like it had bronchitis. How do you know about that?" He left a pause, just long enough to put you in your place. "We'd prefer to tell you in person." I thought about my mother's warnings, about my kindergarten teacher voice that knew when men tried to bulldoze women. "I'm at work. We'll be brief." I considered hanging up, considered pretending I was someone else. But the idea of 2 agents in the lobby felt like a stain waiting to spread. "Fine," I said. "I'll be right down." The hospital lobby has this weird way of making everything feel equal birth, and death and dietary restrictions, and federal agents in dark suits. Klein and Alvarez looked like they were auditioning for a show about federal agents in dark suits. He was tall, square jaw, the gray at his temples arranged with intention. She was shorter, hair back, eyes that counted everything in the room and put it in little labeled boxes. "Ms. Carter." Klein shook my hand just a smidge too long, like he was testing my grip. "Thank you for meeting with us." "What's this about?" I kept my voice flat. Anger never worked with men like this. You had to sand it into something that could slide. Alvarez offered a tight smile that could be read as empathy if you were generous. "We're working an old case with a new lead. You ever hear of the 1987 Great Lakes armored transport robbery?" Of course I had. Even if you never read a newspaper, Detroit tells its own stories on porches, in barbershops, at funerals when the preacher thinks he's a detective and says so from the pulpit. 3 guards dead on a Friday afternoon outside a branch on Gratiot. The city scared itself quiet for a week, like noise would call more bullets. 4 suspects, 2 caught. 1 killed in a raid. 1 vanished. "I'm not a suspect," I said, "because fear makes you say dumb things." Klein's smile slid left. "We'd like to ask what you know about a man named Isaac Cole." The name landed like a dropped wrench. Isaac. It carried weight. Edges. I had never heard my mother say it. The blank space on forms had never had that name inside it. A man in the waiting area gave a baby his bottle while watching me over the rim like we were the television. Who is that to me? I asked, and I was proud of how steady it came out. "We're hoping you can tell us," Alvarez said. "Your DNA results indicate a first-degree relationship to an account we've linked to him." I felt my mouth get dry. "I'm linked to an account." "You sure it's not one of my uncles? Cousins? These things get things wrong." "They can," Klein allowed. "But the Sonnemordens." "Sir, I don't need the technicals. My job is literally to translate technicals into English all day. How did you find my test?" They traded a look, the kind that pretends to be casual. Alvarez's eyes softened by a degree. "We obtained a warrant to identify accounts that matched DNA recovered from the 1987 crime scene. That search produced several relatives, including yours. We're not here to arrest you. We'd appreciate your cooperation in filling gaps." "You got my DNA from a private company?" "We have a warrant," Klein repeated, more to the air than to me. "And we're not interested in your data beyond this case." "Right," I said, "because the federal government has never misused anything." Alvarez lifted a hand like she could catch that sarcasm and file it. "We're trying to close a case that hurt a lot of people. If the man we're tracking is your father, if I can imagine, that's complicated. We can walk carefully." I thought about the grandmother on the bus, the empty silhouette on my screen, my mother's lies reshuffling themselves behind my eyes like cheap cards. "What do you want?" "Photos," Klein said. "Old documents. Names of relatives. Anything that would place your mother in contact with an individual named Isaac Cole between 1986 and 1988. Those dates seem precise. That's when a lot happened." The edge in his voice said he didn't like being questioned. The edges in mine said I didn't care. "I need to talk to my mother," I said. "We would prefer to. She's my mother." I let the steel show now. You can prefer all you want. I'm going to talk to her. Klein looked like he wanted to flex his jurisdiction. Alvarez put a hand on his sleeve, subtle as a breath. "We understand," she said. "Would you be willing to sign a consent allowing us to use your DNA to narrow our genealogical search?" My laugh came out too loud in the quiet lobby. "You got a warrant. What do you need my consent for?" "Because it's the right way to do it," Alvarez said, and looked at me like she meant it. Right way. In a city where my cousin got stopped for walking while tall. Right way when my neighbor's son took a plea because his public defender had 40 other cases and a heart attack brewing. Still, the way she said it left a door open in me almost against my will. "I'll think about it," I said. "And I'll call you." Klein slid a card across the low table like we were at a job interview. We'd appreciate that quickly. We're moving on something, and timing matters. "I bet it does," I said, and put the card in my pocket like it was something radioactive. They left with their dark suits and their air of inevitability. I stood in the lobby until the security guard asked if I needed anything, and then I went to the bathroom and dry heaved over a toilet that deserved hazard pay. By noon, the story had already begun to morph in my head. It morphed more when I called my mother and told her I was coming over. Her salon sits on 7 Mile, tucked behind a liquor store and a pawn shop that still has a neon saxophone blinking in its dusty window. The sign reads Renee's sheer grace in script. She painted herself when I was 10. The shop has 3 chairs, 2 dryers, a jar of combs soaking in blue liquid, and an altar in the corner to saints, and a photo of my grandmother, who never met an argument she couldn't win. Girl, you look like you ain't slept. Mom was in leggings and a Whitney Houston tee, a gold scarf wrapped around her head like a crown. She kissed my cheek, studied my face like it was a mirror. You ever hear of Isaac Cole? I said, because some questions curdle if you hold them in your mouth too long. She went very still. Then she turned to the sink and finished rinsing a teenager's hair with the kind of care that comes from muscle memory. The shop was full of hair and laughter and the soft menace of gossip. She waited until the teenager and her mother left with a set of twist-outs and a promise to be careful in the rain. Then she locked the door and flipped the sign. Closed. Where did you hear that name? She asked, her voice low and flat. FBI. She sat in her own chair and stared at herself in the mirror, like she was asking the other Renee for patience. Lord have mercy. You told me my father died. I told you the only version I could stand to say out loud. Is he Isaac Cole? My throat hurt. Is that his name? She looked at me in the mirror, her eyes shining, but not with tears. There are parts of me I was trying to protect. And parts of you? You hear me? That's not an answer. He was a good man with a bad season. She flinched before the words even landed. I gripped the back of the chair until my fingers went white. A bad season is cheating on your taxes. A bad season is gambling away rent. 3 people died. People have been dying in this city since it was old enough to name itself. She snapped, then pressed her lips so tight they went bloodless. I'm sorry. You're right to be angry. You loved him. Her silence was an admission. How long? I asked. How long did you keep this? Long enough that it built a room inside me, she said. And I painted the walls and put up curtains and called it by other names. I sat on a dryer stool. It made a hollow thunk under me. Tell me everything. She told me about the fall of '86, about a party in Black Bottom, where the music was a body and the room pressed close. The way Isaac could talk to you like you were the only person alive, but listen like you were an ocean he wanted to map. The calluses on his hands. The laugh that made you feel like you'd been let in on something. He said he worked nights, she said, and the look that crossed her face told me she'd been both gullible and punished. He said he was saving for something better. What did you know? I knew he had friends who were not careful. She twisted a curl at her temple until it was a tight spring. He never brought them to me. He never brought me into it. He told me if anybody asked, I didn't know his last name. He told me to tell them he died. Who's them? I asked, already knowing. Police. Feds. Men who show up when your life has to fit in a file box. She nodded toward the back room. There's a box with a ledger. I found it under the floorboard after he stopped coming around. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe I thought I was saving something of him that wasn't a lie. What's in it? Names, I think. But not names. Codes, numbers. I tried to make sense of it once, and it felt like staring at a knot until you see your own face. You never told anybody. I told God, she said, and tried to smile. And your grandmother once, back when it was still something we thought we could laugh about. She slapped my mouth and told me to pray for a dull life. She disappeared into the back and reemerged with a shoebox that had once been white. It had that smell old paper has dust and history, and the knowledge that some things burn too easily. Inside was a ledger bound in cracked black. The first page was a grid of numbers. On the second, a list of what looked like bus routes: GR12, Wood 53, Dex 31 paired with dates, and sometimes a small red dot. That's the old bus system, I said, remembering field trips and my mother pointing out routes like arteries. Gratiot is GR, Woodward, Dexter, 12 and 53 and 31. Those are lines. What's the red dot mean? Stop, I said, before I could stop myself. We stared at the dots. They stared back like unblinking eyes. A car idled outside, bass low and constant. It could have been anyone. It felt like a sentence. My phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You want answers? 7 p.m. Come alone. 13,359 Brush. Don't tell your mama. My heart tried to run, but my body stayed seated. Brush Street. Highland Park. The little city inside the city where the old factories still looked at you with rusted teeth. Who is it? Mom asked, seeing my face change the way mothers do. Spam, I said, lying without even getting a good run up. She reached across the space, like the gap between our chairs was the size of the river. Don't do nothing reckless, because a man asked. Maybe I got that from you. It was mean. It was also true. She winced like I'd found a bruise she forgot to cover. If you're going to go, she said, weighing the inevitability, you take Dre with you. He knows people. He can stand there and look like he could kill somebody. Sometimes that's half the job. I'm not dragging Dre into this. You already dragged me, she said, and before I could answer, she pulled me into a hug that smelled like coconut oil and a 3-decade-old secret. You come home after, no matter what. Dre worked at a garage off Joy Road, where the men had grease under their nails. They couldn't scrub out even if they rubbed down to bone. He was a tall, soft-voiced man who used to be hardest when the world demanded it, and now saved all that for the cars he coaxed back to life. You sure you don't want me to come? He asked, leaning against the bay door, forearms shiny with a day's work. The early evening had that champagne-light Detroit gets when it feels like forgiving you. If you come, I might not ask what I need to ask. I tucked my hands into his hoodie pocket, like it was a habit I was checking to see if I still had. Text me when you get there, when you leave. Every stoplight. He tried to smile and failed. You know I'm on parole with my good behavior. Don't make me do something stupid for love. I won't, I said, and meant it with a ferocity that made both of us look away. Brush Street curved like a spine through old brick and shadow. Highland Park has the feel of a place that remembers the last time it was wealthy and hasn't forgiven the world for taking it back. The address led me to a row house with 2 teeth missing, a boarded-up neighbor on one side, a yawning lot on the other. The porch sagged. There was a light on behind a thin curtain. The kind of place you clock, not because it stands out, but because it's never asked to. I texted Dre. Here. He sent me a skull, a prayer, and a heart, which was his version of a plan. The door opened before I knocked. The man who stood there wore his years like somebody had measured and cut them to fit him. He had a beard like steel wool and eyes that were familiar in a way that made my spine numb. Imani, he said, and the way he said my name sounded like he'd been practicing it in an empty room. You look like Renee around the eyes. My mouth went dry. Who are you? You already know. I want to hear you say it. He looked out over the porch like he wanted to make sure the night was listening. Isaac, he said. My name is Isaac. There are a lot of things a girl imagines saying to the man whose absence built an ache like a second skeleton. Where were you? Do you know how we scraped rent? How we stretched chicken? How we pretended the lights were out on purpose? Do you know what my birthday felt like? when I had to buy my own cake? What came out was, you text like a teenager. A smile flickered and died. Come in. The house had the careful cleanliness of a place that had seen emergency searches. Bare walls. A couch with plastic still on it, like somebody's auntie's living room. A table with a deck of cards and a rosary. A framed photo of a boy I didn't know. The air carried the faint sweet of tobacco that had been trying to be incense. He poured water from a jug, set the glass down without letting it clink. If the feds came to you, they're running low on time. He said it like the weather. What do you know about time? I asked and watched him take it. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Enough to tell you they're not here for truth. They're here for tidy. You were there, I said. Not a question, because if I didn't say some things like they were facts, I was going to drown. I was there, he said, and looked at a corner of the room like a part of him had never left it. I drove. I didn't shoot. People always say that. Guilty people and innocent people sound the same when they're explaining, he said, with a tiredness that made me angrier. But I didn't shoot. I was 24 with more belief than wisdom. We were supposed to scare, not kill. Who's we? He blew out a breath. Doesn't matter. It matters to me, I snapped. My voice startled both of us. You don't get to show up in a rented house and drop the kind of confession that cracks a person and then pick which pieces I get. He looked back at me like he was measuring if he'd earned that. They called us the Northland Four. It came out like a taste he hated. There were more of us, but that's the name they used in the papers. 2 did time. 1 died. I didn't. Because you ran. Because somebody tipped me, he said. And because the person who pulled the trigger was useful to someone with a badge. I stared. He said it like he was dropping a pebble into a pond and waiting for the ripples to be obvious. You're saying a cop. I'm saying the city has always had more than one hustle. Before I could push that, a car rolled slow down the block, engine low and mean. Isaac's head snapped to the window. He moved toward the lamp, flicked it off, and the living room dropped into a softer darkness that made the edges of things honest. Who'd you tell you were coming? He asked. No one. My phone vibrated and I jumped. Dre, everything good? I started to type yes and stopped. Almost. Isaac peeked through the curtain with 2 fingers like he could separate the world with them. I saw it too. Then a sedan I'd seen twice this week without thinking about it. The sort of unremarkable car you hire when you want to be part of the wallpaper. 2 silhouettes, 1 in the driver's seat, 1 on the passenger side, head dipped like a pen. They idled for a count of 10 and kept going. Feds? I asked. Could be, he said. Could be someone else. Could be the ghost of bad decisions. You keep an eye on ghosts. You called me here to spook me? I called you here to tell you the truth before someone else sold you a cheaper version, he said. There's a ledger? Your mother kept it? I nodded before I realized I was nodding. Good woman, he said, and it sounded like a prayer. Those red dots marked drops. The bus lines were code for schedules. That ledger started simple and ended complicated when a man tried to launder his conscience. You kept track of the money you stole, I said. I kept track of the money pumped into 5 blocks where the city forgot to pave the potholes. He smiled, sharp and broken. I'm not asking you to forgive the wrong by pointing at the good. Just don't let them tell you it was all one color. Tell me who pulled the trigger. I will, he said, but not yet. You need to see something first. A spotlight of headlights swept across the front window, and then the soft percussion of feet on porch wood. 2 quick taps on the door. Not a knock, a code. Isaac's face did a thing I couldn't read. He held up a hand and moved toward the door with the slow care of a man who'd made peace with the idea of dying and decided he'd prefer not to tonight. The door opened. A man filled the frame. He was in his 40s, thick-necked, with a scar like a thin white smile across his jaw. His eyes were the color of winter streets. "Evening, Evan," the man said, using the name that had introduced itself in my inbox. He stepped inside without waiting. "Heard you had family in town?" Isaac didn't correct the name. "This is Imani," he said, "and we were just leaving." Scar smiled wider with the wrong part of his face. "You know, that's funny. Because my boss thinks you're overdue for a conversation you've been avoiding since '87. I stepped back. The air in the room went tight. My phone buzzed again, and Scar's eyes slid to it like a cat's to movement. "You brought friends?" Isaac asked, "Two even." "Only the ones you made," Scar said. The next few seconds moved like slow water, and like a fight thrown down a stairwell. The man stepped forward. Isaac grabbed my wrist with one hand, and the edge of the lamp with the other. The lamp swung hard against Scar's forearm with a meaty thunk. Scar stumbled. I tripped, dragged by the momentum of a man who'd planned this moment 100 different ways. "Back!" Isaac hissed, and shoved me through a doorway into a kitchen that smelled like pine sol and old apologies. The window over the sink was half a body wide and stuck. Isaac put his shoulder into it, and it groaned open just as a shape filled the kitchen doorway. "Don't," Scar said, the barrel of a small gun an exclamation point in the room. The pop of it was smaller than I'd imagined, and louder than everything else. A plate on the counter leapt and shattered. I tasted plaster in the air. Isaac shoved me toward the window so hard the frame bruised my ribs. I grabbed the sill and felt fresh air like a confession. Another pop. The window exploded in brittle bursts like rain. I threw myself into the dark alley and hit the ground palms first, gravel grinding into skin. Isaac landed beside me with the sound of a body that carried too many old falls. "Run," he said, and we did. We cut between houses, past a rusted shopping cart that had decided to retire in a patch of weeds, the city's ghostly streetlights drawing long, weird shadows. A dog barked the way people yell at screens. A woman shouted something about minding your business, which in Detroit can be either charity or curse. The sedan screeched around the corner. Headlights skated over fences. A voice called my name in a way that made it feel like a question nobody should answer. "This way," Isaac said, and we squeezed through a gap in a fence that had been a gap so long it was an agreement. He stopped long enough to slap something into my hand, a small black notebook, soft from being touched too often. "If I don't make it." "Don't you say that like it's poetry," I snapped, breath burning my throat. He gave me a look that was both apology and pride. "If I don't, take that to Detective Patrice Holloway." "What makes you think I know her?" "You do now," he said, and the way he said it told me the world was smaller than I wanted it to be. We broke into a jog that would have gotten me laughed off a track team. The sedan's engine wrote our names across the blocks and dotted them with malice. Another corner. Another alley. A chain-link fence that snagged my jacket like it wanted to keep a souvenir. Isaac boosted me over with a grunt that ended in a breath he couldn't catch. He climbed after me with less grace than a storybook, and more than a man his age had a right to. We dropped into a yard behind a barber shop where men already had the chairs flipped up for morning. Isaac pulled me low behind a dumpster and pressed a shaking finger to his lips. The sedan eased past, slow as a thought, then sped up like a decision had been made inside it. We stayed there until the quiet sounded like a thing that might not break us. Isaac exhaled. It shuddered through him. He touched his ribs like he was mapping a bruise, and the smear on his fingers told me what I didn't want to see. "You're hit," I said. "Too loud and too late." "It's a graze," he lied with a face that had lied better. "Hospital," I said. "Hospital is where the federal government sends flowers," he said, and pushed himself to his knees. We made it to the back of the shop without standing up all the way, and Isaac knocked a rhythm on the door that sounded like a joke you'd only get if you'd grown up here. A slit opened, eyes suspicious and then resigned. "Damn, Evan," a voice said, older and warm with trouble. "You picked a hell of a time." "Barry," Isaac said, and almost smiled. "Open up." The door clicked. The room smelled like barbicide and cheap coffee. Barry was a thick man in a tank top with a tattoo of a flamingo that had aged into a question mark. He looked me over like he was measuring how much danger I would add to a day that already had too much. "This your girl?" he asked. Isaac didn't blink. "This is my daughter." Barry's eyes flicked back to me. Then down at the blood, Isaac was pretending not to drip. "I told you that past was going to climb out its grave." "Yeah," Isaac said, and swayed. Barry of the Flamingo led us into a back room where a first aid kit fought for space with bottles of aftershave. I dabbed at the tear in Isaac's side while he gritted his teeth and pretended it didn't hurt. The wound was shallow, meanly so. It would come back to complain tomorrow. "Where's Holloway?" I asked, not sure if I was practicing the name or conjuring her. Isaac's eyes sharpened. "Rivertown Station, 3rd floor. Tell her what I told you. The ledger. The dots. Tell her to look at an officer named." The door rattled. We froze. A voice we didn't know called out, sing-song and ugly. "Open up, Barry. We need a shape-up, and you know my fade can't wait." Barry's eyes met Isaac's. Decisions became air. And then, like God had finally answered a prayer my grandmother had made before she died, my phone buzzed. A new text from a number I didn't recognize. "Holloway, come to the back lot on Riopelli. Come now." I looked at Isaac. He looked at the blood. The world narrowed to a choice. The door we knew, or the alley we didn't. "Go," he said. "I'm not leaving you." "Go," he said again, and this time it felt like a thing he'd been practicing since the day I was born. Barry cracked the back door to the alley. The night looked at us like it had something to say. I slipped the little black notebook into my jacket, the ledger's twin pressing warm against my side. I stepped into the dark. It smelled like damp brick and old hair. "Imani," Isaac whispered. I turned. "I am more than the worst thing I did," he said, and his voice broke on the second word like it had been waiting years to admit it. I nodded, because forgiveness was too big to hold. "So am I." I ran. The alley fed into a lot, the lot into a street, the street into a breath I didn't know I'd been saving. Riopelli was 4 blocks and a city of doubt away. My shoes slapped the pavement like a metronome for a song I didn't like. A dumpster sighed. A cat hissed, because that's what cats do. I cut down a narrow lane between a laundromat and a church's chicken. The back lot yawned in front of me, lit by a street lamp that flickered like it had a stutter. A woman stood there in a plain gray coat that didn't ask for attention. She was black, 40s, hair short and practical, eyes that had seen men lie and children do better anyway. "Imani?" she called, and her voice had the kind of calm that keeps people from bleeding to death in rooms that don't deserve it. "Detective Holloway?" I said, half question, half prayer. She nodded. "You got something for me?" I reached into my jacket, the notebook's corner biting my palm like it wanted to make sure I was awake. Somewhere behind me, tires squealed. A siren yelped like a dog, dreaming of being bigger than it was, and a gunshot cracked the night like ice in a glass. I pressed the notebook into Holloway's hand. "Good," she said, and her mouth tightened in a way that can mean comfort or war. "Now tell me everything. Start with who just tried to kill your father." The cold air clung to my skin in the back lot, like the city was trying to erase me. Detective Patrice Holloway's grip on the notebook was steady, but her eyes flicked to the edges of the street, measuring shadows. "Inside," she said, tilting her head toward an unmarked sedan parked at the curb. "We're not doing this out here." Her tone wasn't a suggestion. I followed her, adrenaline still ringing in my bones from the gunshots and Isaac's blood. The sedan's interior smelled faintly of coffee and peppermint, a kind of car that lived more in surveillance than in motion. She slid behind the wheel, clicked the locks, and turned to me. "Start talking." I did. About the DNI test, about the agents in suits, about Isaac Evan, whatever name he wore, and the scarred man who'd shown up at the Brush Street house with a gun. Holloway listened without interrupting, her eyes steady but sharp, like she was filing everything into drawers that would open when she needed them. When I finished, she tapped the notebook with one finger. "You have any idea what this is?" My mother said ledger, roots, dots. Isaac said bus lines. Her lips pressed thin. "I've been chasing corruption in this city for 15 years. Your father's name keeps coming up around 1987, but always sideways. Never on the paperwork, never clean enough to put in a report. You're telling me he just handed you the key?" I shifted in the seat, suddenly aware of how small I felt in that car. He said the dots mark drops. Money, I guess. He said it wasn't all one color. "That sounds like Isaac," Holloway muttered, almost to herself. "Idealist with dirt under his nails. Men like him get chewed up by both sides." I thought of the way he said, "I am more than the worst thing I did." "Who was this scarred man?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Morris Scar Daniels. Used to be a runner for the Copley crew back in the day. Now he's muscle for hire. If he's sniffing around your father, that means somebody wants the past buried deeper." A horn blared somewhere out on Rio Pelli, breaking the moment. Holloway leaned forward, lowered her voice. "The Bureau wants tidy. That's true. They'll sell you a story where your father is the sole monster. Case closed, everyone goes home. But I've been around long enough to know this city doesn't do tidy. Somebody high up wanted those guards dead, and Isaac Cole has been the convenient ghost ever since." She turned fully to me, her stare heavy. "You want answers, you stick with me. You want safety, you walk away and pretend you never opened that email." I thought of my mother's salon, of her hands shaking around the ledger box, of the fear she wore like perfume. I thought of Isaac's blood blooming on his shirt, his hand pushing me through the window. I thought of the way Scar's eyes locked on me like property. "I can't walk away," I said. A flicker of something respect maybe crossed Holloway's face. She put the car in gear. "Then buckle up." We drove through the city's veins, the streetlights casting everything in gold and shadow. Murals of Malcolm and Motown legends flashed past, their painted eyes watching. Holloway said nothing until we pulled into a garage beneath an old municipal building. Her office was small, stacked with files and boxes that smelled like old paper and sweat. A corkboard lined the wall, crowded with photos, maps, and sticky notes strung together with red thread like a spider's nervous system. At the center, Great Lakes Armored Transport, 1987. The crime scene, photo 3 bodies covered by sheets, the armored truck doors hanging open. Next to it, grainy mugshots of men labeled Jameson, deceased, Rowe, 20 years. Out in 07, Collins, life. And one space left blank, just a silhouette with Isaac Cole, Fugitive, written beneath. My stomach twisted. "You've been chasing him this whole time." "Chasing the truth," Holloway corrected. "Your father's ghost has been useful. Whenever the wrong names come up, they pin it back to him. Easy target. Black man, fugitive, no clean record." She pointed to the silhouette. "Keeps the rest of them untouched." "The rest of who?" Before she could answer, the door buzzed. Holloway moved the monitor, checked the feed. Her body went still. "What?" I asked. She flipped the monitor toward me. 2 figures stood outside the glass security door. Suits, federal. One was Klein, the agent with the jaw cut from marble, and the smugness of a man who thought the system bent for him. The other, Alvarez, her eyes scanning like she knew exactly where the hidden microphones were. They tracked you, Holloway muttered. Damn it. A hard knock rattled the door. Detective Holloway, Klein's voice boomed through the intercom. Open the door. We need to speak with your visitor. My pulse slammed in my ears. Holloway's hand brushed the ledger notebook on her desk. She slid it into a drawer and locked it, then turned to me. You let me talk. You say nothing. If they push, you say you want a lawyer. Got it? The knock came again, sharper. Detective, Alvarez called, her voice calmer. We know Miss Carter is inside. We need her cooperation. Don't make this adversarial. Holloway exhaled slow. She moved to the door, her hand hovering near the release button. Welcome to the game, Imani, she said without turning back. It only gets uglier from here. The buzzer sounded, and the door began to open. The feds were coming in, and every part of me knew they weren't here to listen. The metal door groaned as the feds pushed inside Holloway's cramped office. Their presence sucked up all the air. Klein carried the arrogance of a man sure the room was already his. Alvarez scanned everything, eyes darting over corkboards, boxes, me, before settling like a scalpel on Holloway. Detective, Klein said, we'll take it from here. Holloway didn't move. Her shoulders squared, her stance saying she'd been holding lines like this her whole life. This is my jurisdiction, she said, and my witness. You want her? You wait for a court order. Klein smirked. Jurisdiction ended the second her DNA tied to a federal fugitive. He turned to me, eyes sharp. Ms. Carter, we're offering you protection in exchange for cooperation. Tell us where Isaac Cole is. Every eye turned to me. Holloway steady. Alvarez is searching. Klein's demanding. I swallowed. My mouth was dry, but the words rose anyway. I don't know where he is. Klein leaned closer, a shadow stretching across me. Let me make something clear. That man killed 3 guards in cold blood. He abandoned you. And if you withhold, that's not true, I snapped, louder than I meant to. The corkboard shook behind me. He told me he drove. He didn't shoot. The silence after was electric. Holloway's eyes flicked to me, then back to Klein. Alvarez's jaw worked, like she was chewing the thought. You believe him? Klein sneered. You think fugitives tell the truth after 30 years running? Holloway cut in. I've read the files. The ballistics don't line up. Neither do the witness statements. Somebody inside law enforcement was covering their own. Alvarez shifted uncomfortably. Klein glared. This is over your head, detective. Then pull the files, Holloway shot back. She opened her drawer, pulled out the ledger, and dropped it onto the desk between them. The dots, the roots, they line up with the cash movements and with cops on payroll in '87. Your tidy story won't survive sunlight. Klein's face hardened. He reached for the ledger, but Holloway's hand slammed over it. Chain of custody runs through me. You want it. You subpoena it. For the first time, Klein's confidence wavered. Alvarez cleared her throat. Daniel, maybe we? Enough. He cut her off, eyes drilling into me. Miss Carter, think carefully. Do you want to go down with your fugitive father? Or do you want to walk away, free? I thought of Isaac bleeding in the barber's back room. Of my mother locking the shop, hiding her pain in silence. Of Holloway fighting shadows for years no one wanted exposed. Of Scar's gun, aimed at me like my life was collateral. I stood, every nerve shaking, but my voice steady. I'm not walking away. Not from the truth. The room held its breath. Holloway's lips twitched, the closest thing to a smile. Alvarez's gaze softened, conflicted. Klein's jaw flexed like he'd been slapped. Before anyone could move, Holloway's desk phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the tension. She answered, listened, then froze. She looked at me, her eyes suddenly grave. It's Isaac. He turned himself in. He's at 1300 Bobine. The police headquarters. My knees went weak. Holloway hung up, already moving. Klein swore under his breath, storming out. Alvarez lingered just a second, meeting my eyes with something unreadable, then followed. Holloway grabbed her coat. "Come on." Detroit Police HQ looked like a fortress, pretending to be a courthouse. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting, cameras flashing. Inside, the fluorescent light hummed over walls painted a color that felt like giving up. Through the glass of an interview room, I saw him. Isaac. Hands cuffed, shoulders slumped but proud, eyes finding me like a compass. For a moment, all the years between us fell away. Holloway put a hand on my shoulder. "This is it. They'll press their story hard, but the ledger, the evidence, it'll speak. And so will you." I nodded, tears blurring the man behind the glass. The man who was my father. The man who wasn't just the worst thing he'd done. He mouthed something through the glass. "I'm sorry." I pressed my hand against the pane, my voice a whisper only I could hear. "Me too." The trial took months. Holloway fought tooth and nail, dragging buried files into light. The ledger cracked the case open wider than anyone wanted. Scar disappeared before he could testify. Alvarez ended up on the stand, admitting federal shortcuts. Klein was reassigned to a desk in D.C. And Isaac? The jury saw him for what he was guilty of: robbery, guilty of running, but not guilty of murder. 30 years late, but the truth carved its way free. He'll serve time, not life. Maybe years he won't have, maybe years he will. But when they led him away, he turned once more, eyes wet but unbroken. And I stood in that courtroom, spine straight, mother at my side, knowing the story no longer belonged to whispered lies or government files. It belonged to us. Detroit kept on humming. Sirens, gospel choirs, mufflers, laughter. Life. Some nights, I still hear the shot that sent us running through Brush Street. Some nights, I see Isaac's face, proud and broken. But when I walk past 7 Mile, past the mural of a woman raising her fist against the skyline, I remember something he said. I am more than the worst thing I did. And now I know I am too. The city keeps its ghosts, but it keeps its daughters too. And I'll carry both. What you just heard wasn't the full story. It was the part someone tried to bury. The part that didn't fit the headline. The part where a person, not a suspect, was lost in the process. This case showed us what happens when the system moves too fast or not at all. When suspicion weighs more than truth. When justice shows up late or never. But here's the thing. If these stories don't leave us asking questions, they'll keep repeating with different names. So if this one meant something to you, don't just move on. Talk about it. Question it. Pass it on. Because silence protects the wrong side of history. And sometimes, the only thing standing between truth and erasure is someone who chooses to care. Like, share, comment. Let the next chapter begin with awareness, not regret.